Hey guys, Tim and Jesse with Defense Mechanisms. Wanted to take a few minutes today to talk through some of the night vision devices that we have, some of the pros and cons of each housing, and maybe give you a better idea of why you might choose one over the other. Jesse, why don't you start it out?
Yeah, man. So I guess kind of first what we want to talk about is, single versus dual, right? Articulating versus non. So obviously the benefit of having both eyes, right? Still same 40-degree field of view, but perceived depth perception, right? So you're going to be able to do things much better under dual tubes as both eyes are getting the same input to the brain. What I find really beneficial is setting dual focus, right? So having one set kind of near and one set at infinity. And that gives me most depth ranges, right? It's only up until I get like real close that it starts to get fuzzy for me. The other benefit of having articulating over something like an RNVG is environmental lighting, right? So especially when you start to move around city and urban environments, really handy to be able to peel off one of those tubes to be able to punch IR, into areas of darkness, but see what the actual environmental lighting condition is around you. So those are kind of some of the benefits of dual over single, and then the articulating over non-articulating. Starting off, we'll get into the night vision devices, ULB-NVD. This is their single gain model. What I really like about this is pretty affordable, right? Lots of different tube options here, so it gives you kind of, your price range, kind of some variance. But it kind of has all of the best options. So you are getting some adjustable diopter back here. You've got the onboard IR illuminator, as well as adjustable gain. And, we'll talk kind of in this video. Some of these features I thought were going to be more important to me than they actually turned out to be. Right. But you do get the articulating shutoff as you peel them up into kind of visor mode. And you do have an option from the factory to get the onboard battery pack. This takes AA, right? And you get 20 hours off of a single AA. If you step up to the battery pack, obviously that's going to increase that quite a bit. These came in at 16.82 ounces, right? So kind of right here in the middle of what you'll see on the other two. But all in all, like I said, I think for bang for the buck, you're getting, a lot of nods in this package for a pretty affordable price.
Absolutely. So I most of the time use these DTNVS. Let's take a quick minute to talk about these. These have a lot of the similarities with the ULB-NVDs. They're articulating, same articulation. The pods power up. They do have a large range of articulation. I tend to run these most in visor mode, and I really appreciate that the pods power off for me when I rotate them up. Other feature sets here, it's pretty basic. These are not manual gain like the ULB-NVDs. These are auto gain, so you just turn them on and they automatically adjust to ambient light. And when I first started getting night vision, I was pretty sure I was going to want that manual gain. I thought that it was going to be super important to be able to dial it up or dial it down based on lighting conditions. And what I have found is I just don't notice. And these guys, they're basically always at max brightness, and it's fine. I don't notice. It ended up being a non-issue really. Other things about the DTNVS. So I personally think they added these IPD stops to set the distance, your interpupillary distance. I don't think that's necessary on articulating nods. I think we'll talk about that on the 31 alphas also have IPD stops, and I run these with completely never adjusted the IPD stop. They're all the way backed out so I can have full range. I'm probably, after this video, actually going to get a screwdriver, remove the 4 screws, and throw this thing away. It doesn't do anything for me. So if that was something you were super interested in, is if you needed IPD stops, I don't think you do. It's very intuitive to just set them where you need them every time you adjust the pods, excuse me. Really, there's not a lot of cons to the DTNVS in my mind. The only one, with these 3 housings, they are the heaviest. These ones are 17.36 ounces compared to Jesse's at 16.8, and we'll talk about the 31s in a second here. But they're about 1.5 ounces heavier than 31 alphas, about 1 ounce heavier than Jesse's. and or about a half ounce, excuse me. But the reality is there's just not a lot. There's not a lot to be mad about. They work really good for me, and really nothing to be upset about. These guys, however, have some things that make me mad.
Right, so CR123
Yeah,
battery
correct.
this one as well. Like you said, I think a really sexy housing. You know, it looks good for the gram for sure. And you know, then obviously got the staple 31 alphas. For a long time, super hard to get, right? TNVC finally last year made them available to the public. We jumped right in as soon as they became available. And yeah, I mean, you know, again, some downsides to these, right? So why don't you kind of walk us through the cons first, Tim?
Sure. So the biggest and most immediately in your face con is that the pods do not power off when rotated up. And this is a con for a couple of reasons. One is I actually really like to put my nods on and turn them on and then rotate the pods up to have them be off and just leave them like that. If we're, like when we do a lot of training where we're traveling into town, we're gonna do hits on multiple houses while we're traveling. So I'll throw them on, turn them on, get everything set the way I want, rotate them up, jump in the van, and 20 minutes, 30 minutes later when we get to the hit, I roll them down and off we go. With the 31 alphas, if I did that, I'd be draining my battery for no reason, and I don't like that. Obviously, I don't want to drain my battery, but I also want to have everything set up and ready to go. You know, it's not a big deal to turn them on and off. The push button, it did elude me for a minute, but it's a lot easier than I thought it was, and so it's not a big deal. The other issue with that is if I do have them rotated up and they're on, I am splashing light onto my helmet. Not a huge issue, obviously for training, not a huge issue, but in real life, I don't know if you want to be, if you want them off, you want them off, if you want them on, you want them on, right? Another con with these is where they put, because the pods don't power off, a lot of people choose to run a remote battery pack with these guys just to have more battery power, more life, because it's going to eat batteries faster. Well, where they put the battery pack connector limits the ability to rotate the right tube all the way up. With the battery pack plugged in, my knuckle will simulate, you can only rotate it up partially, and it's just not as convenient. I would typically rotate it all the way up, and so you end up with this kind of cockeyed configuration. Is it the absolute end of the world? No, it's not the absolute end of the world, but there's better options out there. Same thing with these have IPD stops that I think serve almost no function. And realistically, the only other con that I can think of right now, I'm sure you got something, but is that without an adjustable diopter, these are going to be set for people with 20/20 vision, which shouldn't be a problem because most people who don't have 20/20 vision have it corrected. Like I wear contacts, but because I'm corrected to 20/20, these work fine for me. What did I miss?
No, man. I think that pretty much covers it all. You know, like I said, all three sets, hard to be mad with any of them. I think, you know, most feature rich, obviously, this kind of has everything packed into it. You know, once in a while, the adjustable gain, especially if you get into conditions where there's a lot of ambient light around, right, it does make it nice that you can turn it down. You know, as an operational standpoint, I think a lot of the times I'm just going off what it is. It's auto gating down most of the time. I think the onboard IR illuminator, never have once used it, right? I think there's a lot of better options out there. And I think that goes into, like, you know, obviously buy the best tubes you can, but what you're going to find is, like, where these tube specs, like, where people get into the nitty gritty with it, right? A lot of that is going to be with training, proper IR illuminators, you know, things like that. So same thing goes for, like, these daytime caps, right? Right here you can see we're rocking the Tarsiers. You know, really expensive for, I think, what they are. Here's what I've found, you know, using them, like I said, through training, things like that, right? If you don't use a dual focus, it makes it very hard if you're trying to focus your nods on the fly to actually pinch this at the bottom and, you know, be able to adjust your actual focus. They have a tendency, if you try to open them, right, real easy when they're like this, but when you're actually using them, you can over-rotate this a lot, and it's actually hard in some of the lighting conditions to tell where it's actually open to. Where I find they kind of shine the best is when I'm walking behind students that are using they're using flashlights for low light runs. I can dial those down to like basically daytime apertures and walk behind them and be able to, watch for safety manipulation, things like that. Other than that, I don't really find them super, super beneficial. Sometimes walking through the city, again, there's a lot of ambient lighting. I can kind of dial those down to be able to keep both tubes down. But other than that, I find you could probably do the same thing with just, burning a small hole into some caps. But these obviously look way, way cooler for the gram. So sex appeal points on those for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man, I think that that kind of covers, the three different sets here. Like I said, I don't think you can be mad with any of them. Some of them just have a couple of features that maybe if that's important to you. I think being able to shut off when you articulate, that's super important. So, that kind of puts the 31 alphas out there for me. Yeah, these other two, like I said, real, real nice. So anything else on...
No, man, I think that really covers it. One thing, you touched on tube specs a little bit, and to just talk about this for a second. On both our 31 alphas and our DT-MVS, we have very high-end unfilmed tubes from L3, and we're running thin-filmed Elbit tubes in our BNVD, ultralight BNVDs, which we both have a set of those. And people, Jesse mentioned people get very bent out of shape about tube specs. They're hunting for tubes, the best tubes, the cleanest tubes, Here's my opinion on that real quick, is for the civilian market, the higher quality, the higher FOM, the better the tube is, the more likely it is to have some larger blems, right? We have some super tubes and they have bigger blems, because if they didn't have bigger blems, they wouldn't be available to the civilian market. They would have got picked up for military use. But also blems aren't a big deal, right? Tiny little black spot doesn't actually affect how you use things in the real world. Just like thin film versus unfilmed. The only time you can really see a difference between these thin filmed Elbits and the unfilmed L3 is in extremely dark, cavernous dark situations, inside a building with no windows kind of situation. And in that situation, yes, the unfilmed tubes pick up a little more light. They give you a little bit more to see, but they're also very grainy. Like both of these are very grainy with just a little bit more light in the unfilmed tubes, which what ends up happening is then you use your illuminator. And once you use your illuminator, there's absolutely no advantage again. And so we tend to be of the opinion that like a little blem on your tubes isn't a problem. The best tubes versus really good tubes, like get really good tubes. If you can afford the best, sure, go for it. But none of that, whether there's a blem on it, whether it's thin filmed or unfilmed, none of that is going to affect your ability to use these, to train with them, to fight with them. That's that's us getting worried, arguing about caliber. It's just not. It doesn't have any actual value. Get out and train with these things. You'll see.
Right, like yeah, if you're taking photographs underneath them, right, having some blems, some fixed pattern noise, definitely going to play more of a role when you're out actually, using them. That stuff, tends to get kind of lost in the weeds to the problem solving at hand. So buy the best that you can get. But what I've seen from great, like decent tubes all the way up to the super tubes is training is going to benefit you much more in that area. And having good laser illuminator, things like that.
Yeah, save the $2,000 on tubes and spend it on an illuminator.
For sure.
Get them all. You want to.
All right, guys. Well, there it is. If you got any questions, please hit us up at contact@defensemechanisms.com. We'll catch you in the next video.